This video was sponsored by Brilliant. Hey, happy Friday. This week Snapchat announced that they have 1 million paying subscribers for their service somehow. Qualcomm actually got scammed out of $150 million by their own vice president. And the US announced a new set of bans on Chinese chip making. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. Okay, my release highlights this week start with Android 13, which is now released for Pixel devices, and we've also seen some previews of manufacturer skins like ColorOS 13 as well, which should launch on Oppo devices later this month. The new features are pretty minor this time, so I won't go over all of them here, but I've left a link to a good video down in the description. Also this week, Samsung announced the absolutely gargantuan Odyssey Arc gaming monitor, a 55-inch model with a curve with a 165Hz mini LED display, speakers and more for $3,500. Then Dell also announced new monitors from its Alienware brand, and the most ridiculous thing about these is that Dell specifically says that you can overclock these from 240Hz refresh rates to 280Hz for games like Counter-Strike. First time I've heard a brand actively claim that you can overclock their monitors. Also this week, Kim Kardashian's special edition Beats Fit Pro collection became available, which is just skin tone colors in a matte finish for $200, and I somehow find these weirdly appealing. Next, Logitech released new Chorus headphones, which you can slide onto an Oculus Quest 2 to get built-in sound. It looks kinda quirky, but people are apparently really big on modding their Quests anyway, and for $99, the price is not too bad. And while we are at the Quest, Mark Zuckerberg also released this selfie from the company's Horizon Worlds, which is now operating in France and Spain. And as you'd expect, Zuckerberg was mocked for this relentlessly. I mean, why does all of their stuff just look so damn ugly? Okay, my first story of the week is going to be something that I personally missed completely, and it is that Snapchat not only has a paid subscription service, but that as of a few days ago, they apparently also have over 1 million paying subscribers. 1 million. So just 6 weeks ago, Snapchat apparently added Snapchat Plus, a $3.99 monthly subscription that offers features like priority replies to celebrities, new Bitmoji backgrounds, custom app icons, and so on. And this week, Snapchat said that more than 1 million users are already paying for this service and that they've reached these numbers despite only having a limited launch geographically. 1 million users in such a short time is actually pretty impressive, and this makes Snapchat the only social media company, except for maybe YouTube if you can call them social media, that has a successful, at least somewhat successful, subscription business. I mean, Facebook doesn't have one, Instagram doesn't have one, TikTok, as far as I know, doesn't have one, Twitter has one, Twitter Blue, but basically nobody uses it. So Snapchat is kind of the first one here. Now mind you, Snapchat is a pretty big platform, it still has more active users than Twitter for example, but I'm still surprised to see this. I guess Snapchat is trying to find an alternative revenue source since Apple's new privacy features have hurt their ad business, and meanwhile the company also just announced killing its drone, the Pixie, before actually bringing it to market, so I guess they're trying to focus here. Okay, and my second story of the week is going to be that the US has just announced a brand new set of bans on Chinese chip-making technologies that should make it even harder for the country to make advanced chips going into the future. So on top of things like extreme ultraviolet lithography, which we've discussed in the past, the US has now introduced new bans on the export of 3 more chip-related technologies. First are 2 materials, specifically gallium oxide and diamond, interestingly enough, which are so-called ultra-wide bandgap semiconductor materials, which can operate under more extreme temperatures and voltage conditions. The official explanation is that these materials are apparently particularly useful in weapons, so that's why the ban. And next is advanced software called Electronic Computer Aided Design, or ECAD, that is used in manufacturing, and it is supposedly crucial for making so-called gate-all-around field effect transistors, or GAFETs. GAFETs are used to make the upcoming next generation 3nm chips and beyond, and apparently without the appropriate software, getting there is really difficult. As a reminder, Samsung just announced their 3nm GAFET powered manufacturing a few weeks ago, and TSMC is supposed to begin mass production of them this September as well. So that's potentially pretty devastating, especially when China was already struggling with the previous set of bans, and these announcements came out at the time when the rest of the chip industry is also struggling with a problem of their own: oversupply. That's right, after all the global shortages since the start of the pandemic, semiconductor makers are warning that they're now facing a rapid downturn, but because everyone was rushing to build more capacity, now the next and opposite problem is on the horizon. Chip giant Micron warned this week that it is beginning to see some inventory adjustments occurring in automotive and industrial markets, and that it sees further weakening in PCs and smartphones along with the cloud as well. Intel, Nvidia, TSMC, and SMIC are all predicting falls in demand, and many of them are now starting to slash capital expenditures too. A CEO of a company that makes phone chargers, for example, said that it all happened almost overnight, with companies in April pressuring them to increase production, and then in May deciding that they now had too much inventory, which they now needed to cut in half. Pretty wild. This is called the bullwhip effect in supply chain management, and it says that if there is some kind of imbalance that occurs, then companies start to overproduce, then underproduce, then overproduce, and underproduce in a kind of vicious cycle for a pretty long time potentially. Okay, and my third story of the week is going to be a pretty bizarre one, and it involves Qualcomm, who apparently paid $150 million for a startup that was secretly founded by its own executives. The story comes from the US federal investigators who arrested two former Qualcomm vice presidents last year, but the indictment has just been unsealed this week, and it's completely wild. So back in 2015, Qualcomm bought a chip company called Abrizio for $150 million, believing that it was buying chip technology from a startup helmed by a Canadian graduate student named Shida Alan. That graduate student, however, turned out to actually be none other than the younger sister of Qualcomm's vice president of R&D, Karim Arabi, who had actually changed her name from Shida Arabi to confuse Qualcomm. Apparently the sister studied inkjet printing, so something that I suppose is pretty different from the chip company that she was supposedly building, and it was apparently also her brother who filed, for example, for patents and came up with the name of the company. Of course, Arabi's employment contract with Qualcomm, like many others, stated that the company owned any intellectual property that he created while employed there, so him building the startup in secret was very much a breach of his contract. The other Qualcomm vice president alleged to be involved was former VP of Engineering Ali Akbar Shokouhi, who helped fund the startup through 3 different companies he didn't disclose to Qualcomm, and the $150 million was apparently split up between them and then laundered via foreign real estate purchases and interest-free loans. Qualcomm sued them in 2018, but the ballers just decided to keep lying until they eventually all got arrested. Now, there's obviously a ton of money floating around in chips and computing, and there's a high demand for engineers and skilled professionals and also startups. And the best way to pick up and apply new engineering skills in those areas and many more is through my sponsor, Brilliant. Brilliant's courses, which cover things like computer science fundamentals, logic, and even quantum mechanics, are crafted by award-winning teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Microsoft, Google, and more, and they cover topics from beginner to advanced levels. Brilliant's courses are exceptionally interactive and well-structured, and they help you learn by breaking down complicated concepts into small chunks, after each of which you do an exercise, so you practice what was just explained right away. That ends up building a deeper understanding versus just listening to someone explaining a concept without engaging with it. This way you can get better at your job, or you can get a new job altogether, or you can just learn something to be smarter. You can try Brilliant for free using brilliant.org/TFC, and the first 200 people who sign up using that link will also get 20% off their annual premium subscription. So check them out, happy learning, and I'll see you next week.